Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. This week's Parsha is Tetzaveh, and it continues the pattern that we've been talking about, that the last five Parshiot of the book of Exodus or the book of Shemot are all about building the Mishkan, or the way that the priests should conduct themselves in the Mishkan. What is the Mishkan? The Mishkan is the portable tabernacle that the Jews built while in the desert, and then it's sort of the precursor to the Beit HaMikdash, the main big temple in Jerusalem that the Jews eventually had. So all throughout the parsha, we're learning about the garments that the priests would wear, the special cloaks and turbans and breastplates and sashes. It's all very beautiful and descriptive, and the colors are very vibrant, and it's all beautiful. And it's beautiful and lovely to learn about what the priests did. We've talked about how there's a lot of detail of what the human beings did in order to become close to God versus, we talk about how there's very little amount of information about the building of the earth, about the creation of the whole universe, in the book of Bereshit. But then there's like five parshas about how we built the Mishkan, the portable tabernacle. And again, it's proof of human effort for becoming close to God. So that's what this is all about. But what I think is more interesting to talk about this week is the fact that it's a special Shabbat. It's Shabbat Zachor, or Shabbat of remembrance. And this is actually it's unusual, but it's about Purim, Zachor of Amalek. Okay, so what is that? Remembrance of Amalek. Who is Amalek? Okay, just wait. Why do we read Zachor now? We read Zachor now because it's the Shabbat before Purim. Purim is coming up on Thursday. Of course, we know the story of Purim. Queen Esther marries King Ahasuerus. He has this guy that works for him, Haman, who hates Jews. Haman wants to destroy all the Jews in all of Shushan, Persia, and Queen Esther stands up and saves the Jewish people. And we learn that Haman is a his he's the his dis he's a descendant of Amalek. And who is Amalek? Amalek is the group of people, or the ethnicity of people who attacked the Jews as they were leaving Egypt. So after the Red Sea, after the sea split, the Jewish people walked across, and as they were, leaving, this group of people, Amalek, attacked the stragglers near the end who were weak. And so we always read the week before Purim, we read this. You shall remember what Amalek did to you on the way out when you went out of Egypt, how he happened upon you on the way out and cut off all the stragglers at your rear, when you were faint and weary and he did not fear God. Therefore it will be when the Lord your God grants you respite from all your enemies around you in the land which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance to possess, that you shall obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath your heavens. You shall not forget. Okay. What did Amalek do that was so bad? Okay, so he attacked this group of people attacked the weaklings. Okay, that's not good. We shouldn't do this. But what is this really about? There's clearly something else. We read Parsha Zachor. We read these few lines every year before Purim, before this holiday, about this person Haman who is descended from Amalek, who wanted to destroy us. What is this all about? Okay, so I've never really connected to it until this year. I listened to something really interesting that really moved me. We need to be reminded that there are some enemies in this world that are enemies without a cause, and that are enemies that hate without logic. I don't need to extrapolate much to connect to why that's relevant now. It was relevant last year. It was relevant, well, it wasn't relevant the year before, but it became relevant. Uh, this idea of an enemy like Amalek, who hates with no reason, who kills the innocent, who kills the weary, who kills the weak and vulnerable. That is an enemy that kills and hates without logic. Logically, the Jewish people have just there's been the 10 plagues. The God of the Jewish people has destroyed Egypt with the 10 plagues. Pharaoh himself says, fine, leave. The Jewish people leave. The sea splits. It's two walls. The water is two walls. The Jewish people walk on dry land, and the water falls and destroys all the Egyptians. Who in the world wants to cross the people, the Jewish people, whose God does something like this? A group of people who have no logic, who hate without thought. And that is an enemy that we are up against now today. We have to remember that there are enemies who are not liberal, open-minded people like we like them to be, people who we cannot talk to and discuss and set aside our differences. We are still fighting Amalek, and we must remember never to forget that there are enemies who hate without cause, and enemies who hate without thinking, and enemies who hate without logic. Who would dare go up against the strongest intelligence community. You're talking about the state of Israel, strongest army, most impressive air force, yeah, whatever, all these different things. Israel's been so amazing. Israel's accomplished so much. It's a tiny little engine that could, all watched over by the God of Israel, of course. Who would go up against such a country? Who would go up against the most moral army in the world? Who would go up against the strongest people in the world? Enemies who hate without cause and without logic. You know what I'm saying? And then one more positive thing to end on. We say never forget. But in never forgetting, we must always remember not who Amalek is, but who the Jewish people are. And I heard some very moving stories about hostages who were released from captivity from Hamas, and some really meaningful things where they remembered who they were, not just Israelis, they're Jews. So these are two stories that I heard that were very moving. Omer Shem Tov, who was released shortly ago, uh, grew up not religious, was not religious before he was taken captive. He got grape juice in captivity and kept it and saved it for 5 months so that he could do kiddush, so he could do kiddush on Shabbat. Never really was religious before. In captivity, while being held by genocidal terrorists, he found a way to have faith and to do something holy, to connect to God. Ohad Ben Ami, also not religious, from a secular kibbutz. He was a kibbutznik, not a religious guy, never before was religious. His people, while he was held captive with, were doing Havdalah. He had never done Havdalah before, and he wanted to learn about Havdalah in captivity. And after he was released from captivity, they did Kiddush and Hamotzi on Shabbat, the first Shabbat that he was released. All he wanted, he didn't want fancy food or anything fancy. He just wanted to do challah, Kiddush, and candlelighting on Shabbat, the Shabbat after he was released. A guy who's never been religious in his life. We don't need to be in the most difficult, scary situations that have ever existed, captivity, to remember who we are. We are the Jewish people. We have traditions for thousands and thousands of years that we have continued. Prayers that I've said, that you've said, that every line going back to the Jewish people at the beginning of time said. All of these things are the exact same. That's because we never forgot who we were. We cannot forget who we are as the Jewish people. And that's my message for this week. Shabbat shalom. God willing, you'll have a restful Shabbat, and God willing, I'll see you all next week.